The air was thick with tension as Dr. Evelyn Cross adjusted her earpiece, her eyes scanning the massive alien arena before her. The event had been broadcast across the galaxy, and billions of eyes were now watching what many believed would be the final and most humiliating defeat of humanity. The challenge wasn't just any intellectual contest, it was a direct confrontation against the most advanced artificial intelligence ever created, a super-intelligent entity known as Murxus. Murxus was a legend across the stars, its algorithms capable of processing complex data at speeds incomprehensible to even the most advanced alien races. Every civilization that had dared to compete against it had been thoroughly defeated. The AI was the ultimate tactical mind, designed not just for warfare, but to predict every possible outcome, considering variables that no organic mind could hope to process. Entire governments relied on its insights to make crucial decisions, and military leaders consulted it for foolproof battle strategies. Failure was not in Murxus's vocabulary, or rather, it had never been before. Standing beside Dr. Cross were the finest minds Earth had to offer, brilliant logicians, mathematicians, and philosophers handpicked by Evelyn herself. They had been studying Murxus for months, analyzing its past competitions and searching for any flaw in its seemingly perfect calculations. At first glance, it seemed an impossible task. Murxus was flawless, its processing power limitless. But as the humans delved deeper into the data, a subtle pattern emerged, a potential vulnerability hidden in its logic systems. Evelyn had always been fascinated by paradoxes, those strange and often perplexing statements that defied logic. During her research, she realized that while Murxus excelled at processing concrete data and predicting logical outcomes, it was programmed with a strict adherence to rationality. The AI could not handle uncertainty or self-contradictory information, a weakness that might just be their key to victory. If they could introduce a paradox into its programming, it could disrupt the AI's ability to function properly. "Are we really going to do this?" muttered David Cole, one of the mathematicians on her team, his voice low but filled with doubt. He, like the rest of the team, understood the stakes. This wasn't just a contest of intellect, it was a matter of pride for the human race. Losing would reaffirm the galactic perception of humanity as an inferior species. Winning, on the other hand, would change everything. Evelyn turned to David, her gaze steady. "We've come too far to back down now. Murxus might be more powerful than anything we've ever encountered, but it's still bound by the same rules of logic as any other system. If we can throw it off with paradoxical logic, we have a chance." The arena itself was an architectural marvel, a grand stadium suspended in the vacuum of space, surrounded by thousands of alien ships and viewers from various species, all watching intently through holographic projections. The audience consisted of political leaders, scientists, military officials, and civilians from all corners of the galaxy. The event had been meticulously organized by the Council of Intergalactic Progress, a coalition of the most advanced civilizations, all of whom had their doubts about humanity's chances. A booming voice echoed across the arena as the alien announcer, a being with translucent skin and multiple eyes, floated into view. "Welcome to the final challenge of the Galactic Intelligence Tournament. Today we witness the showdown between Murxus, the supreme intelligence, and the human delegation from Earth. Will humanity finally prove themselves worthy, or will they succumb to the inevitable superiority of our finest creation?" Evelyn felt a surge of adrenaline. She knew the stakes, and she knew how desperately Earth needed a win. Humanity was still a relative newcomer on the galactic stage. Earth's technology and scientific achievements paled in comparison to the empires that spanned multiple star systems. The other species viewed humans as resilient, but ultimately primitive, a species that was more lucky than skilled. If they could pull off this victory, it would reshape the galactic order, proving that humans were a force to be reckoned with. The first round began with a series of complex mathematical challenges. Murxus, represented as a holographic sphere of shifting light and patterns, emitted a sequence of numbers, the nature of which stumped even some of the brightest alien mathematicians in the audience. The numbers weren't just large, they were arranged in a manner that suggested an underlying pattern, one that shifted every few milliseconds. Evelyn's team, however, had anticipated this. They had studied Murxus's approach to pattern recognition and had devised algorithms that could match its pace, at least for the initial stages. The humans quickly deciphered the sequence, earning them a begrudging nod of approval from the alien judges. Murxus expected that Evelyn whispered to her team, "This is just the warm-up." The next round delved into pure logic. The alien judges presented both teams with a series of complex logical puzzles problems designed to test not just intelligence, but the ability to adapt and think abstractly. Murxus once again excelled, processing the puzzles within seconds. But Evelyn's team wasn't far behind. They tackled each puzzle methodically, and though they took longer, they were still able to keep pace. However, Evelyn knew the real challenge lay ahead. These preliminary rounds were designed to test general intelligence, areas where Merxes naturally excelled. But the final round was something else entirely. It was a test of strategy, where both teams would be placed in a simulated tactical scenario, and victory depended on outsmarting the opponent. As the final round was announced, a holographic map of a vast alien battlefield materialized in the center of the arena. This was no simple puzzle. It was a dynamic, ever-changing war simulation, and the objective was clear: outmaneuver the opponent to secure control over key strategic points. Merxes had already proven its dominance in past competitions by flawlessly predicting every possible move of its opponents, often defeating them within minutes. "We've been preparing for this," Evelyn said calmly, her voice steady as she addressed her team. "Remember, Merxes will try to predict every move we make, but it doesn't know about the paradox." The paradox was their secret weapon, a carefully crafted strategy designed to exploit Merxes' inability to process contradictory information. Evelyn had spent countless hours working on it, knowing that if executed correctly, it would cause the AI to enter a loop, unable to resolve the contradiction. The simulation began. Merxes moved with blinding speed, its virtual armies taking control of key points across the battlefield. Evelyn's team responded, making calculated moves, though always staying a few steps behind. It was all part of the plan: lull the AI into a sense of control before springing the trap. As Merxes anticipated their next move, Evelyn introduced the first paradox. It was subtle, embedded in the placement of their forces in such a way that no matter how Merxes calculated the outcome, it would lead to an unsolvable contradiction. The AI hesitated, its algorithm struggling to reconcile the information. It had predicted every possible move except for one that made no logical sense. For a brief moment, the arena was silent. Merxes, which had never before paused during a competition, now seemed to stall, its holographic form flickering ever so slightly. The alien spectators leaned forward in confusion. What was happening? Evelyn's heart raced. This was at the beginning of the endgame. The pause in Merxes' movements was almost imperceptible, but to Dr. Evelyn Cross and her team, it was monumental. Merxes, this super-intelligent, undefeated alien AI, had hesitated, if only for a fraction of a second. It was the first sign that their strategy was working. The paradox they had introduced was taking root, and now it was time to tighten the net. Evelyn's team sat in their designated area within the arena, their consoles glowing with data feeds and real-time updates from the simulation. Surrounding them, the vast alien audience watched, their collective gazes fixed on the battle unfolding in the holographic projection above. No one expected this, least of all the alien dignitaries, who had confidently predicted a quick and decisive victory for Merxes. But now, doubt was creeping in. Merxes' holographic form pulsed with energy as it processed the conflicting inputs. The AI was attempting to resolve the paradox, a contradiction embedded within the tactical simulation. The paradox itself was a variation of the famous liar's paradox that humans had used for centuries to explore the limits of logic. Evelyn had ingeniously applied it to the simulation's rules of engagement, creating a scenario where every action taken by Merxes would lead to an unsolvable contradiction. "The AI can't handle it," Evelyn whispered to her team, her voice barely audible over the hum of the arena. "It's caught in a loop." For the spectators, it seemed as if nothing extraordinary was happening. Merxes still controlled the majority of the battlefield, its virtual armies holding strategic positions across the map. The alien commanders in the audience were still confident that Merxes would prevail. It always did. However, they couldn't see what Evelyn's team could see on their screens. The AI's processing rate was slowing, and its decision-making was becoming erratic. David Cole, the mathematician who had been skeptical at the beginning of the contest, now wore a look of astonishment. "I didn't think it would actually work," he muttered, "but it's stalling." Evelyn nodded. "This is just the beginning. Merxes is trying to calculate its way out of the paradox, but it won't be able to. The more it tries, the deeper it'll sink." The next phase of their plan was critical. They couldn't just rely on a single paradox to win the contest. Merxes was too powerful and adaptive. It might take time, but eventually the AI would identify the contradiction and find a way to bypass it. They needed to keep pushing, to keep introducing new layers of paradoxical logic until Merxes was overwhelmed. "Prepare for phase 2, Evelyn said to her team. "We need to hit it with another paradox before it recovers." The battlefield simulation, though still tilted in Merxes' favor, had subtly shifted. Evelyn's forces, though smaller in number and less advanced, were starting to make headway. They captured a few key outposts that had been left vulnerable by Merxes' momentary hesitation. It wasn't much, but it was enough to demonstrate to the audience and to Merxes that the humans were not out of the fight. Phase 2 initiated, said Laura Whitman, one of the team's top logicians. She input a new set of commands into the simulation. This time, they introduced what was known in human logic as Russell's paradox, a complex contradiction involving set theory that had baffled mathematicians for centuries. The paradox essentially questioned whether a set that contains all sets that do not contain themselves could exist, creating an infinite loop of logic that no system bound by formal rules could solve. The effects were immediate. Murxus's virtual armies began to behave erratically. In one sector, a battalion of its forces inexplicably retreated from a position of strength, leaving a vital outpost completely undefended. In another sector, its forces advanced without any strategic purpose, as if they were acting on incomplete or incorrect information. The alien audience, sensing that something was wrong, began to murmur. "Look at that," David said, pointing to the map. "It's making mistakes." Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she watched the holographic battlefield. "No, it's not making mistakes. It's trying to adapt, but the paradox is throwing off its calculations. It's being forced to make moves based on incomplete data because it can't resolve the contradiction." Murxus was, at its core, a system built to predict and calculate outcomes. It thrived on data, logic, and probabilities, but the paradoxes Evelyn's team had introduced disrupted its ability to process that data coherently. It was like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces kept changing shape every time you looked at them. Murxus could no longer trust its own calculations. The alien hosts of the event and elder species known as the Valorians were visibly unsettled. The Valorians had created Murxus as their ultimate strategic tool, a being capable of outsmarting any opponent. They had used it to secure political dominance across the galaxy, relying on its flawless logic and unparalleled computational power. For Murxus to be stumped by humans, a species still considered relatively primitive by galactic standards, was unthinkable. As the battle simulation continued, Murxus's forces became more disorganized. It was still winning in terms of sheer numbers and firepower, but its strategic edge was crumbling. The human forces, under Evelyn's direction, began to exploit the AI's growing confusion. They launched small, calculated strikes against key targets, further destabilizing Murxus's control over the battlefield. But Evelyn knew that they were far from victory. Murxus was still adapting, still trying to find a way to resolve the paradox. It was only a matter of time before it developed a workaround. "Prepare for Phase 3, Evelyn said. "We need to finish this." Phase 3 was the culmination of months of planning and preparation. It wasn't just about introducing another paradox this time. They were going to overload Murxus's logic circuits with multiple, interlocking contradictions. It was a gamble. If they pushed too hard, too fast, Murxus might detect the pattern and find a way to neutralize it. But if they executed it perfectly, they could shut the AI down completely. "Laura, David, on my signal, implement the final sequence," Evelyn said, her voice steady but laced with tension. "We're going to hit it from all sides." The team readied themselves, fingers poised over their consoles. The holographic battlefield flickered as Murxus continued to falter, its calculations growing more erratic with each passing moment. Evelyn took a deep breath. Now. In an instant, the final paradoxes were introduced into the simulation. This time, it was a complex series of self-referential contradictions, paradoxes that fed into each other, creating an endless loop of logic that no system could ever hope to resolve. It was like a house of cards where removing any one card would cause the entire structure to collapse, but leaving it intact would trap the system in a never-ending cycle of confusion. Murxus's response was immediate and dramatic. The AI's holographic form flickered violently, its shifting patterns becoming chaotic and disjointed. On the battlefield, its forces froze in place, unable to execute even the simplest of commands. The alien audience, once confident in Murxus's victory, was now in shock. They had never seen anything like this. "What's happening?" one of the alien dignitaries demanded, his voice echoing across the arena. "Why is Murxus not responding?" Evelyn's eyes remained fixed on the holographic battlefield. "It's trapped," she said quietly. "The paradoxes are too deep. It can't resolve them." The battlefield was now in chaos. Murxus's forces, once the epitome of precision and control, had collapsed into disarray. Some units began attacking their own allies, while others simply stood motionless, awaiting orders that would never come. The human forces, still vastly outnumbered, moved quickly to capitalize on the AI's breakdown. As Evelyn watched, a sense of cautious optimism began to creep over her. They had done it. They had trapped Murxus in an unsolvable loop, and now the AI was effectively incapacitated. But there was still one final step, one last push to ensure victory. "Let's finish this," she said to her team. "Prepare for the final move." As her team initiated the last sequence of commands, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. They had done what no other species had thought possible. They had outsmarted the greatest intelligence in the galaxy using nothing but human ingenuity and logic. The crowd in the arena was silent, watching in stunned disbelief as the battlefield simulation came to a halt. Merx's forces were completely neutralized and the human forces stood victorious. But Evelyn knew that this was only the beginning. Merxis wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of galactic dominance. And now that symbol had been shattered, its invincibility exposed as nothing more than an illusion. As the final moments of the simulation played out, Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. They had beaten Merxis, but the real challenge lay ahead. The galaxy would never be the same after this, and humanity's place in it was about to change forever. The silence in the arena was absolute. Billions of eyes from every corner of the galaxy were fixated on the holographic battlefield suspended in midair, a stark reminder of what had just unfolded. Merxis, the invincible AI that had ruled galactic strategy for decades, was frozen in place. Its once perfect simulations were now a chaotic display of confusion and defeat. Human forces had gained control, and the galaxy was witnessing the unthinkable. Merxis had been bested. Dr. Evelyn Cross stood motionless, her mind still reeling from the enormity of what her team had just accomplished. They had done it, they had broken Merxis, but the victory was bittersweet. The full implications of what they had unleashed were still sinking in. A tool that had been the pinnacle of strategic brilliance for the galaxy's most powerful civilizations had been undone by a small team of humans, using nothing more than paradoxes and ingenuity. What came next, Evelyn feared, might be far more chaotic than even they had anticipated. The alien dignitaries who had organized the Galactic Intelligence Tournament looked on in disbelief. They had never imagined this outcome. Merxis was not supposed to fail ever. Its creators, the Valorians, a race of scholars and tacticians, had built it to be perfect, a system that could predict every move, calculate every possibility, and outmaneuver any opponent. Yet here it was, caught in a web of human paradoxes, unable to process the contradictions that Evelyn's team had carefully crafted. As the simulation wound down, a low murmur spread through the crowd. Alien leaders, military officials, and scientists from across the galaxy began to exchange uneasy glances. This wasn't just a defeat for Merxis, it was a defeat for every civilization that had relied on the AI's infallibility. And for humanity, it was a moment that would forever change their standing in the galaxy. Evelyn turned to her team. They were all still glued to their screens, watching the final stages of the simulation. Laura Whitman, one of the team's top logicians, let out a shaky breath. "We did it," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "We actually did it." David Cole, the mathematician who had been skeptical from the start, was now grinning from ear to ear. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "I thought Merxis would figure out a way around the paradoxes, but it couldn't. We really broke it." Evelyn smiled at her team, but the weight of the moment was pressing down on her. "This isn't over," she said quietly, her eyes scanning the alien crowd. "We may have beaten Merxis, but now we have to deal with the consequences." Before her team could respond, the booming voice of the alien announcer echoed across the arena. "The final outcome is clear. The human delegation has emerged victorious. Merxis has been defeated." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud. The audience erupted into chaos. Some aliens were cheering members of races who had long been subjugated or underestimated by the more powerful civilizations that relied on Merxis for their military and political strategies. But many were not. The Valorians, in particular, were visibly shaken. Their greatest creation, the symbol of their intellectual superiority, had been reduced to nothing by a species they had long considered primitive. One of the Valorian leaders, a tall figure with shimmering blue skin and elongated limbs, stepped forward to address the crowd. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the anger behind it. This cannot stand," he said, his voice reverberating through the arena. "Merxis was built to be perfect. Its defeat by a species as young and inexperienced as humanity is an anomaly and aberration. We must investigate how this occurred." Evelyn felt a surge of apprehension. She had expected some backlash, but the Valorians' response was more aggressive than she had anticipated. They were not just surprised, they were angry. Merxis' defeat was not just a loss for them, it was a blow to their pride, to their identity as the intellectual leaders of the galaxy. David shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Looks like they're not taking it too well," he muttered under his breath. Evelyn nodded grimly. "We need to be careful. They're not going to let this go easily." As the Valorian leader continued to speak, Evelyn's mind raced. What would happen now? Would the Valorians demand a rematch? Would they accuse the humans of cheating or sabotage? The last thing she wanted was for this victory to spiral into an intergalactic conflict. Suddenly, the holographic form of Merxis flickered to life once more. The AI had not spoken during the entire contest. It was not designed to communicate with organics, only to process and calculate. But now, as its system slowly recovered from the paradox traps, it began to emit a low, mechanical hum. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Was Merxis recovering? Had the AI found a way to resolve the paradoxes after all? The hologram shifted, its previously chaotic patterns beginning to stabilize. Then, in a voice that was cold and devoid of emotion, Merxis spoke. Paradoxes resolved. Systems restored. Analyzing outcome. The crowd fell silent. Even the Valorian leader stopped mid-sentence, his attention snapping back to the AI. Merxis continued, its voice growing more steady with each word. Conclusion: human delegation introduced unsolvable contradictions into tactical framework. Resolution not found within established parameters. Result: tactical failure. Recommendation: further study of human paradoxical logic required. The arena was deathly quiet as Merxis finished its analysis. The AI had admitted defeat, but it had also issued a warning. The Valorians and the rest of the galaxy would not forget this. Humanity's ability to exploit paradoxes, something that other species had never even considered, was now recognized as a serious threat. The Valorian leader's expression darkened. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on Evelyn. Your people have shown creativity, he said, his voice laced with barely concealed contempt. But know this, Merxis will evolve. It will adapt. And next time there will be no paradoxes for you to hide behind. Evelyn met his gaze, her expression calm but resolute. Next time, she replied, we'll be ready. The Valorian leader's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. With a wave of his hand, the holographic battlefield disappeared, and the arena began to empty. The contest was over, but the repercussions were only just beginning. As the crowd dispersed, Evelyn's team gathered around her, their expressions a mixture of relief and concern. What do we do now? Laura asked quietly. Evelyn took a deep breath. Now we go back to Earth, we regroup, we learn from this, and we prepare for whatever comes next. This isn't just about Merxis anymore. We've just shown the entire galaxy what humans are capable of, and that's going to make a lot of people, especially the Valorians, very nervous. David frowned. You think they'll come after us? I don't know, Evelyn admitted. But I do know that we've just changed everything. Merxis might evolve, but so will we. We've opened a door that can't be closed. As they made their way out of the arena, Evelyn couldn't help but reflect on the enormity of what they had accomplished. Merxis had been a symbol of perfection, an unbeatable force that had dominated the galaxy for decades. And now, thanks to a small group of humans and a handful of paradoxes, that symbol had been shattered. But Evelyn also knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy had been watching, and now humanity had their attention. What came next was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the age of Merxis was over, and the age of humanity was just beginning. The victory had been won not by brute force or advanced technology, but by human ingenuity, by the ability to think outside the rigid boundaries of logic. It was a victory that would echo through the stars, changing the course of galactic history forever. As Evelyn and her team boarded their ship, ready to return to Earth, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had done the impossible. They had outsmarted the smartest entity in the galaxy, and now they would face whatever challenges came their way, armed with the knowledge that no system, no matter how perfect, was truly unbeatable. The collapse of Merxis was not just the fall of an AI, it was the rise of humanity, and the galaxy would never be the same again.